Help me welcome Richard Linklater.
Hey guys. Hello, Sag Harbor.
You're nice and big on the screen. We had to move the theater to the
Probably
bigger
too
one.
big if I'm, yeah.
No. We had to change theater because it was selling out in the 100 seats. So it's a great crowd. Thank you for
Oh,
coming.
wonderful. Yeah, thank everybody for being there.
Um, uh, Rick, did the Nouvelle Vague represent for you as a young filmmaker?
Yeah, I think by the time I came along in my early 20s and the early 80s, it was so established. It would have been fun to live at that time and feel the revolutionary spirit of changing times, but it was always kind of there in my own cinema consciousness. When I really started watching films and learning about films, the Nouvelle Vague was there. But to me, it represents like kind of the beginning of what we would call the independent cinema, the new, just the idea of film as personal expression, that, you can make a film about anything. I just love the irreverence and I always say the Nouvelle Vague sort of lowered the stakes of filmmaking a little bit, in that films didn't have to be genre big concoctions. You could make a film about personal things, what's on your mind. You could make a film about your childhood. You could make a film about a romance or a trip, or, they spoke very openly about this. I think it was just like personal expression is the key, kind of like Beat Writers or something. There was something in the air in the late 50s into the 60s, clearly in the arts, about spontaneity. The idea of Jack Kerouac writing, spontaneously write a whole book in, a short amount of time, jazz improv, so I think that was in the air, and Godard kind of carved out a spontaneous movie out of the world right in front of him. So to me, that's just a beacon of independent cinema. You can make a film about what's right in front of you.
So much of the film is recreating that energy and that spirit. So you have this incredibly accurate reconstruction of the set and the atmosphere and the people, and then this effervescence, which feels very contemporary and speaks, I think, to young and not so young audiences as the present.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I wanted the film to work on that level. It's a bunch of young people getting together and making a film, with their friends. That's kind of what it's always been in the indie world for the last 65 years. So I hope the film excites people about cinema. It's not really just the making of this one film. It's about an entire film culture. There's a lot of writers and all the crew members. I wanted to kind of honor the people who dedicate their lives to this, all the crew people. It's a different kind of person who wants to just live in cinema, whether you're writing about it or working on a crew or whatever. It's kind of a unique personalities that come aboard film productions and all that. So I don't know, it was a kind of a love letter to the act of making a film, which I always thought was pretty funny. I mean, I always thought this film was pretty comedic. There's something funny about making a film. And Godard himself is such a funny character. He's just so different than everybody else. But I like that he's motivated by it. If you're going to do something different, it's okay to do it differently. And you see him doing that. There's a cinematic revolution going on, but maybe only one person's aware of it. Everyone else is just irritated,
Can you, as I was saying before, you really reconstruct, I mean, shot equipment, you went out, looking for lenses, you replicated the aspect ratio of the film, the black and white. Can you talk a little bit about that technical aspect of making this exactly how they did it, or as close as possible?
I was trying to replicate the look. What the Nouvelle Vague always meant to me was, it was in French, obviously, black and white. Not all Nouvelle Vague films, of course, are in black and white, but so many, this kind of aspect ratio, the film stocks of that. Now, there was a look, feel, texture, and sound to those movies, English subtitles. So that was the movie I was making. I was trying to make a movie that felt like it was made in 1959. I told the crew and everybody working on the movie, it's like, yeah, this movie was found in an archive or an attic last year and it's just now getting released. A friend of it, Godard didn't make it, a friend of his made the film, and we're kind of, so I really wanted it to feel like a film made then, but obviously 64 years later, that Paris, I mean, it's still there, but it looks so different. But what they could do so effortlessly, just show up on a street and shoot, and no one even know they're making a movie. We had to construct everything. Our film was made 180 degrees opposite of the movie you watch being made is so different than what we were doing, but we were still trying to replicate that spirit. It just took a lot of effort, but everybody was in on it. It was like a historical research and project for everybody working on the film. We all got into it, and we got really lucky. Everybody was very generous. We the camera you see in this movie shooting the movie is the camera that shot Breathless. For instance, when Raul Cotard,
Was it?
when Raul Cotard passed away, he left all his stuff to this archive, and we went in there and the Camaflex was there and it was still working, and we said, can we use it? And they're like, yeah, sure. So that was constant. We were just being blessed by the French film gods were with us on this movie. But yeah, I had never shot in any of those things. I'd never made a black and white movie, certainly hadn't made a French movie, and hadn't worked in that aspect ratio. But it was wonderful to get inside another film like that, and yet kind of make my own film, you know, around it. So it was I was in some weird cinematic dream the whole time. It was a wonderful dream.
Do you think that the fact that you're an American filmmaker gave you a freedom more than what like, there've been other film made on Godard, and they're not as good or as fun. Let's put it that way.
You know, those films that no one seems to like in France, ultimately they were almost kept us from being made. Like, oh no, these don't work. But then they also kind of allowed me to do it. They were sort of like, well, we've always messed this up. Maybe you can do it right, because I think the Nouvelle Vague is so historically important. It still weighs over their the French film industry is still known for that largely all these years later. So if you're a young filmmaker or just anybody since, it kind of weighs on top of you, the way Beethoven and Mahler and Mozart way over Vienna, or something. How are you going to top that? So we don't really have that in the US much. Certain communities do if something great went on there, but we're always kind of about the future. So I think there's a certain kind of, they have a relationship with it that I just don't have. They're not my grandparents or fathers and mothers, that I was just a fan from overseas. So, and if you think about it, there's a bit of maybe there's a conversation going on between the countries. Godard clearly was making an American crime film genre, low, but he dedicates the movie to Monogram Pictures, a poverty row house, churning out little crime movies. So it was that American crime film filtered through his unique cinematic, a cinephile, French cinephile, existentialist late 50s consciousness. And so I think this film is maybe the Nouvelle Vague, if it's a genre, filtered through kind of more of an American indie feel, I'd like to think. So I was very relieved when I realized how much the French people cared and wanted, because I always thought years ago, I was thought about this film for well over a decade, and I was thinking like the French are going to hate this. Let's not even ever show it in France. Let's make it for the rest of the world. They're going to hate it just because an American did it. But the closer I got to it, I was very relieved that they really liked the effort. They liked what we were trying to do, and totally supported it. So.
And that Cannes screening was incredible. The audience reaction was triumphant. Yeah.
Well, it was one of those meta experiences. There's probably not a lot of films at Cannes that have a scene from the Cannes Film Festival in the movie. We were all looking for that, forward to that when we shot at Cannes a year before. We're like, wouldn't that be great if we were back here? So yeah, life gives you these little moments every now and then that are kind of fun.
Was it easy? And then I'm going to open it. Otherwise, I can keep going. I'm going to open it for questions. But was it easy to convince the producer? They're all French, to shoot, to basically use, except for Zoe Dutch, actors that are not, that are unknown.
Yeah, I mean, France is a wonderful film industry. They're pretty insular. There's a lot of stars in France that we might not know over here, but you know, they're known there. And they were thinking, wouldn't it be great if we cast some of them? Of course, shoot in color, cast stars. That sounds good. But I convinced them. I think they were okay with the black and white of it and the cast. Once we started finding the what I call the real people, the people who looked like a lot like Belmondo and Godard and Truffaut and all of our characters, and they saw them all together, say, "Oh yeah, I see what you're going for." I said, "Yeah, it's just not only do you need to get that, it can maybe cast the spell that if you don't know them, the actor, and this for any film, historical film, when you're depicting an icon or someone famous, if you don't know the person playing them, you can kind of maybe shut off the critical part of the brain and you can actually think that's them and you are, I wanted the audience to feel like they were back in 59 hanging out, you know, around this movie and this place and time. So I think it helps. Yeah.
It's funny you say hanging out, because you've been described as making hangout movies, and this is one of, it's another it's another one of those where everybody's having a very good time.
Yeah,
It's just
well,
a different place.
yeah, I've noticed in the last few years, I've been kind of this genre has been pegged on me. I'm sort of the hangout. There's a genre, I'm the, progenitor of it or whatever. But Hitman's not a hangout movie. My last movie, that's got its own genre thing going. So, but yes, these kind of ensembles, I guess, I do like the you are there-ness. I think film does that very well. It can transport an audience, and when I'm making a historical film, I'm always kind of against the films that feel too self-important, like, oh, we're in the past, so everything's serious. It's all important. I was telling the cast all the time, like, you're not playing an icon. This isn't important. You're this guy isn't known. He's a cahier du cinema critic who may or may not know what he's doing. Nobody's an icon. I mean, Seberg was known. She's in her own category, but everybody else, it's like this film will probably, not work and no one knows good. I was always trying to lower the stakes and take away any importance that might surround our undertaking here, you know.
Raise your hand, because it's dark. I don't see. There is one here. No, hold on for the mic if you don't mind. So ears as well.
Richard, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, great. I'm just curious. In the context of the acting, I think the performances are pretty much as you just indicated, so real, and you never felt you were looking at people recreating a historic moment. They were in this thing that could have been the biggest disaster going, and Seberg did bring a bit of a reputation with her. How did you approach the characters with the performers? Because the leads, especially, did you try to leave them as much in the dark, so to speak, and up to their own imaginations as it did in the film, or did you really have it scripted much more?
Yeah. Oh, everything about this film is 180 degrees different than what they did, they could just show up on streets and film. We had to build everything. We had to recreate everything. 64 years, it's very different. And I even told the cast, you know, the spontaneity and the improv, the way they're working is not the way we're going to make this film. We are going to rehearse a lot. We're going to get the team together, the ensemble. We're doing it in the complete opposite way. So they studied their characters. I mean, it is a fair question. Can we agree for an actor to ask a director, who's my character? Is there a script? Gene Seberg was not being a prima donna. Belmondo, he just knew Godard, and he's so easygoing that he could kind of go with it. So, Seberg notoriously was kind of baffled by Godard and thrown off for sure. But I think she did have a pretty good time on the film. When you look at all these photos of her, and she always had a smile on her face, or she seemed okay. And I gave all that to Belmondo. Belmondo's the easy glue that kind of keeps the whole thing going, in my opinion. But something special happened between them for sure. The charisma of both them. I think that's why we're still watching that film all these years later. But an actor would do everything they could. They watch every interview, they watch all the movies, even though we're focused on 59, they really get to know their characters. Zoe had to do a lot of research, not only watching Seberg's two previous films with Otto Preminger, but every interview you can get, everything you can get a hold of. And then I told them, we're not doing impersonations, you make it your own character, a living, breathing young person of this time. So, we're doing an impression of them, but we're going to create our own bubble of where this is the world. And, I didn't even, a lot of films, there's a temptation to kind of break ranks in the closing credits and show the real people. I said, we're not even going to do that. While we were making this movie, I forgot what the real Seberg and Belmondo and Godard even looked like. I was kind of like, these are them. And, we just created our own bubble that we maintained all the way. But they give the actors all the credit. Everybody worked so hard, they really did. And they're good actors. There were a lot of guys, not a lot, a handful, who might have looked like Jean-Luc Godard, who had the right, but Guillaume was gonna, he had this sense of humor. He kind of had this swagger about him. I call it the unearned swagger and confidence of a first-time filmmaker. He's kind of like, he carried himself in a certain way, and he was funny in a weird sort of way. I'm like, yeah, you are Godard. And same thing with Aubrey as Belmondo. I was like, he had this ease about him. And it turns out he knew Belmondo's name, but he had never really seen Breathless. He was so like, I didn't really, he was like, where other actors came in for the auditions and they were like, Belmondo is so important to me. He's like, they're all kind of, and Aubrey was like, icon schmicon. He had this ease to him that I thought very Belmondo-esque. So, you gotta believe it when you see it, but casting is everything for sure.
There was one in the back there.
Hi, Richard. Yeah, that was very enjoyable. Did Godard leave behind a detailed shooting log that gave you the day to day what he was doing each day?
Godard had his notes. There was some notebooks that went on sale recently. I think they ended up in the Beauregard estate, and it's like a shooting script. But there was never a shooting script. He had a lot of notes he worked from. We got all of our information. There were a lot of official documents, such as camera reports, vis-a-vis the lab. We had a lot of the script notes and camera notes. We kind of raided all the archives and got a lot of material. I could tell you, what day they shot in, how many takes they did, what lens they used. We really knew this film so well. But Godard himself didn't leave a lot of people talked about it, a lot of documentaries, interviews. There was so much historical facts and quotes and stuff, but he never, he was moved on to his next film kind of quickly. And I don't know, he has a unique relationship with this film, but he didn't leave a lot personally. He left impressions on everybody. So, we almost don't see it from his perspective in a way. So, but I don't think he wasn't one for a lot of self-reflection. He didn't write a memoir or do anything remotely like that. His cinematic brain works so differently. So, but well documented from everyone's perspectives.
I'm an American, but to me, this felt very authentically French. And I'm just curious, as an American director, how did you capture the essence of Frenchness in such a subtle and natural way?
Well, that was certainly the goal. I was trying to make a French film. I was Zoe and myself were the only Americans. Well, John Sloss, our exec producer, was around, but like as far as crew and cast, it was a French film, French cast, film, French crew, French producers in Paris, so I was a French filmmaker kind of, but I, which was it was fun. It was like so, yeah. And I obviously love the history of French film. I can talk forever about it. So, yeah, I just tried to get into that wavelength, so.
Do you use the techniques that Godard used in your films, or are you completely the opposite?
Well, depends on like techniques, like this film, I didn't want it to feel like a film made by Godard. I said, we're not going to do jump cuts in that way. We're not trying to ape that particular film. What we're trying to do, I wanted there not to be a shot in the movie that wouldn't fit in a Nouvelle Vague film of 59 to 62 or something. The way the films look, the textures, the look, everything about them, I was trying to replicate. And this film was an interesting, for me, it was about erasing the past. I erased cinematic past all the way back to 59. I wouldn't use any techniques that came in, so obviously there's no Steadicam or even elaborate crane shots or dolly shots. They couldn't afford them, kind of simple means. They were low budget, and, they would shoot off balconies. And, I watch a lot of these films with the sound off and shot by shot. My cameraman, David Chambil, this wonderful young French cinematographer, we had so much fun looking at other films. Even, Godard films were like, okay, is this on? They're using a tripod here. Look how steady it is. And then you see a slight little bump. Like, no, he's good. He's a really great cameraman. Look how smooth this is. They weren't trying the cliche that's sprung up around handheld jump cuts. You see it. I think music videos killed it off forever, but people have handheld and they're shaking it and bringing attention to it. They didn't really do that. If you really look at the films, they were trying to be as eloquent as possible, but just maybe they didn't have a good dolly. They were being pulled by a wheelchair, but they were, the language of it was actually pretty simple. It was in the editing. So I was just kind of going with that. So I don't really think there's techniques that were particular to Godard. Like I told the whole crew, this film's being made by, one of the other Nouvelle Vague makers, not, like Jacques Rosier or someone who's a friend of Godard's. He's making this film. It'll look like that.
Speaking of the surrounding characters, I think one of the beauty of the film is also how it's not. I mean, it is the core, it's the make Breathless, but there's all this world, and it's all these young. They're film critic, they're writers, they're actors, and how did you? And I'm not French, but all my French cinephile friends told me that you capture even that part really perfectly. They were all looking to get you, but. But they did it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the French they've got their knives out. They just don't know if they're going to stick them in or not. But yeah, we just outworked them, but we out cinephiled them. To me, the core of the movie is at the Cahiers du Cinema office. We're depicting the cinephile culture of that moment, which to me is so unique in film history. I mean, there were little new waves going on all over the world at this very moment in the United States, even, Cassavetes, Shirley Clark. But France just had so many great films coming out, so many filmmakers in one place, that the pickpocket crew would run into the breathless crew on the street, that all these filmmakers, Jean-Pierre Melville is his advisor. He was looking at dailies, he's got Rossellini in his ear. The elders are all around, and then, but they're critics, I use that technique. I had that idea to just give everyone like a title card with their name, and, you might know, no one really knows all of them, but they were all around. A lot of them are Cahiers du Cinema writers. A lot of them are historians, a lot of filmmakers, and people who were just around the scene. So I kind of wanted them all on an equal playing field, whether you're Jean Cocteau or Jose Benzarov, the little card dealer, sleazebag guy. They're kind of all equal. They were all alive at this time and part of this scene. So, I was just trying to capture that atmosphere, but it was really just a love of cinephiles, people, adults who've dedicated their entire lives to cinema. It's a real cinephile movie. Everyone in it is a film freak.
Time for one more here, and another one. Yeah, this one here. Here, it's been waiting.
Hi. I think it's been 35 years since Slacker. And I'm wondering if, like, in the making of this film, this sort of meta-literal film, how has it made you think about your career and what you've done over the last many decades? And by the way, you can answer this like Melville at Orly if you want, in a very abstract way.
They put on some shades. Oh, and then no, I'm not that witty or quick. Quick. Well, I couldn't help. This film's really about the making of a first film. All the exhilaration and uncertainty and terror that goes with that. So, as I was saying, I was trying to erase cinema history. I was also erasing my own history back the decades of films all the way back to, say, Slacker, which is not really technically my first film, but I call it my first film just because it was the first time I was working with a crew and a lot of people looking at me, asking questions I'd never heard before, things like that. It's pretty harrowing, your first film. You don't really know what you don't know. You're by definition insecure, but if your passion can override it. And on Slacker, it was a very new wave inspired movie. I didn't have a traditional script. I just had a bunch of notes. I had an idea I couldn't really explain to the people working on it, they were along for the ride. They were backing me, but I could still see, there's question marks all over you. You're not proven. It's a pretty fraught experience. And I see in Godard, he's covering up what he doesn't know with, a little bit of bravado, these quotes, he's very entertaining and funny with you can laugh with him or at him anyway, as much as you want, because it's just kind of funny what he's filling in all his blank spots with, this kind of bravado. But he's actually pretty insecure. How can you not be? So I was back making my first film again, for sure. It was a wonderful headspace to get, you hear that a lot in the world, go back to beginner's mind. I actually felt like I did that on this movie. But instead of that insecurity, I actually somewhere back there had, 3 decades plus of filmmaking, let's say confidence and experience. So it made it a really joyful experience, so.
I think this was one lady, and that's the last one because she's been waiting for a long time. Ivana, right there. Yeah. No. You. Yeah.
Hi, I so appreciate your.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just want to congratulate you first for being able to give us this movie that is really a beauty. The essence of being able to explain and reproduce the feeling of the Nouvelle Vague is fantastic. The selection of the character that you did. I personally met Godard many years ago, and it was exactly like that. You were able to catch his spirit, his creativity, his new way of really doing things. Belmondo also, this character of being so creative, so happy all the time. So I really think that this movie is very important, chiefly for young people, chiefly in this country. In Italy, it was different where I come from. It was different because the Nouvelle Vague was part of our life at that time. But here, many people don't know really the Nouvelle Vague. You are able to really give us the picture, the feeling, the beauty, the revolution of this movie. So thank you very much, because this is a movie that will stay in the history. Fantastic.
Oh, thank you very much.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm excited for people who really know the history, who, if they appreciate it, but I also like the idea of a young person seeing it and maybe not knowing very much, but it pulling them into this world, because it looks like, that looks like fun to make a film with your friends. That looks like, what a cool place and time. Who are all these artists? I imagine them looking up all the films and watching them, you know. I just, you know, anywhere where people love movies is those are my people, you know.
Okay, there's the very last one that
Okay. I'm just dying to know, when you arrived at all those amazing quotes that Godard was just throwing off, are they yours? Are they his? Are they from his reviews? Where are they all from? I mean, how did you arrive at the choice of those?
There's
those
never been a
particular-
director anywhere close to Godard as far as is just a total quote machine. He spoke in aphorisms. They poured out of him. He inverted everything. He turned everything around. His brain is so unique. That's why I always say you can be inspired by Godard, but you can't imitate Godard. It's impossible. When anyone tries, they fail. They fail. You know, I'm much closer in like sensibility, spirit to like Truffaut or Romer or some of them, obviously. But Godard is so different. He's just so different and so funny. You know, I don't know. He's unique brain, just his own language. You know, there's just such a different character. So, but no, he wrote, between writing these things and saying these things and quoting these things. Yeah, there was a lot. There's so much to pick from. You know.
And I'm afraid this is all we have time for. Rick, thank you so much.
Oh, great seeing you. Thank
It's great
you.
to see you.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming out to the movie. I'm glad you seem to enjoy it. It's
Thank you.
have fun with it.
And
So,
thank
okay.
you for coming. Good to see you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.